early in my journey, I discovered this principle that money earned ethically is a byproduct of value creation. And so for me, it's always about like, how could I create the value such that I would reap the rewards that I desire for my life and be fulfilled, enriched by enriching others. And so it certainly makes it rewarding on all fronts to operate that way. It's fulfilling.
Hello, and welcome to the Abundantly Clear podcast. I'm so excited for this really special episode that we have today. Jim Fisher, welcome, and it is so great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited to catch up.
Me too. This is just going to be a very open-ended reconnect call. You know what we're doing on this episode? It's almost like you and I want to have a catch-up, but we're recording it because we know there's going to be some gems in here. So why not have some fun and make some content out of it along the way? Sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the feeling is mutual.
Awesome. Okay, so before we really kind of jump into questions and your journey and all of that, I want to just know what you're excited about right now. Like before we even go into your past, before we go into typically the first question is, tell me how you got started. I want to know what you're excited about today. Right now, what are you guys working on? What are you excited about?
I'm excited about the expanding vision that I have because of the people that I'm surrounded with. When you are on a journey and you kind of see this picture that I think drives you initially, I think is constrained by when you think it's all up to you. And what really excites me and lights me up now is that we have so many people like on the team and joining the team and just, great relationships beyond our team that allows me to see something much bigger because I don't feel like it's all up to me anymore. And so that's what's really exciting is that, I literally have something posted on my wall that was, my vision when it was just my twin brother and I, who's my business partner. And now there's so many other people kind of rowing the boat along with us that I feel like the destination that we can get to is so much further. And the island that we'll conquer when we get there is so much bigger. So that's what excites me.
I love that response because when you and I first met, so it's 2025, it's May 2025 as of the recording of this episode. And we first met, I had to look at my calendar. I was using a different email address. So I had to find our first meeting on an old email address to figure out when do we actually connect and start our conversations and start working together. And it was November of 2018. Which feels like a lifetime ago, but hearing everything that you just said, it's such a testament to your growth because back in those early days, you were grinding. Not that you're not grinding now. I'm sure you're still grinding now, but it was like you and your brother, and then you were building your team, and it was very boots on the ground, just trying to get people going. And now you've got this company with all of these employees who love working with you guys. You guys are doing so many incredible things. So let's tell the listeners a little bit about what you do for work. What are we even talking about? Let's give them the background. What are your companies?
Back then, it was, when we met, I was trying to be too many things to too many people, and it felt like a grind. At the time, I was more of what I would call a savior CMO. You have a growth problem, I'll come in there and fix everything at once to get your business growing again. And maybe you grow a lot and learn a lot through that process. But in 2018, I was on this relentless pursuit of focus, becoming everything to someone rather than something for everyone. And it was just constant pruning and refinement. Where do I create the most value that I can bring a team around and organize around that level of focus and power? And so it was this pursuit of focus that has led us to where we are now. Where do we create the most value? Well, it's ultimately become a very specific part of the financial services industry where we help people in that final stage of retirement planning. Most people know financial advisors as someone who helps you manage money in the market and kind of accumulate this nest egg of retirement savings. And we come in at the later stage and say, well, how do you make that nest egg last forever? And more specifically, basically, how do you turn assets into income sustainably and in some cases guaranteed for life? And so it started with being a marketing and growth partner for a very specific type of financial service professional, someone who often has an insurance license, sometimes also has securities license as well, and helping them grow their business in this area and segment of the market, which is what we would call retirement income planning. And then along that way, wanted to answer the question that would come up when people were considering working with us. Hey, if you're so good at this, why don't you do it yourself? If this works so well, if your marketing is so good, why don't you do it yourself? And so decided to answer that question by saying we do. We just can't serve everyone. So I got licensed, and that certainly compounded our value proposition because we weren't just kind of teaching and marketing from principles, but more from practice. And that has led us to build these other companies, because after we start doing it yourself, just like a real estate agent has to affiliate with a real estate broker, so does someone who has an insurance license or securities license. They have to affiliate with a firm to get access to financial products. And so, people started saying, hey, can I just work with you completely? I put my license with you. And that started to create the other businesses. So now, Juicebox, the marketing and coaching company who works specifically helping develop and scale virtual retirement income professionals. Now we also have the insurance brokerage, because a lot of times retirement income planning, like setting up pension-like accounts, is using insurance products. And then we also have a registered investment advisory for the money that still kind of needs to be managed at risk in the market. And so we've kind of become vertically integrated, so much so that we started to develop some of these insurance products based on the gaps that we saw in the marketplace. And so we have these businesses that, you start in like kind of the more typical internet marketing, get the funnel hacking awards and things of that nature. But then, because of our background in other businesses, my brother and I really went after, pulling those marketing and sales skills in this virtual online environment into, these legacy business models, and innovating there to create something unique and different in the marketplace for consumers and for the people that we support who serve them, those financial professionals focused on retirement income planning. And so, now we're driving an impact in a B2B lens with the financial professionals, as well as through them to consumers.
I got the joy of an opportunity to work with you from 2018 to, I believe, the very beginning of 2024, maybe the end of 2023. And in hearing you talk about that snippet, somebody that's never heard of you before, they might hear everything you just said and think, wow, he must be really passionate about insurance. He must be he's an insurance guy. Like, that's his MO. And I'm sure it is now. You probably know a heck of a lot about insurance. But the thing that I believe is your unique ability that you bring to business is this relentless focus of, how do I bring more value to my customers? How do I bring more value to the people that I'm helping? How do I bring more value to my clients? And you have never not focused on that. I mean, day after day after day, week after week after week, it is this constant pursuit of, how can we give more value in what we're doing? And that is something that I believe is instrumental in why we're having the conversation that we're having and the growth of the company in not a very long amount of time.
Early in my journey, I discovered this principle that money earned ethically is a byproduct of value creation. So I want to earn more, be more valuable. And it's just way more fulfilling. I actually grew up, with a more of a disdain for sales, because sales, to me, that disdain was rooted in this idea of self-interest. And then along my journey, I realized that there is a profession or a level of professional in selling, and it was to uncover problems that you can solve and bring value and clarity to those problems. And so for me, it was a path to, in that nobility of the profession, to actually actually be fulfilled, to not have that, that self-interested tilt, that, is exhausting because you're just trying to push your ideas on people that may not need them and act out of self-interest. And it's hard to get a good night's sleep doing that. And so for me, it's always about like, how could I create the value such that I would reap the rewards that I desire for my life and be fulfilled, enriched by enriching others. And so it certainly makes it rewarding on all fronts to operate that way. It's fulfilling.
It is. And I think it makes the entrepreneurial path a little bit less lonely. A lot of people talk about the loneliness of being an entrepreneur, and it can be true. But when you embody an energy of give and connect and who can I help, it's not as lonely that way.
For sure. It's, as you were saying that, I'm like looking off to the side of my desk because, yeah, I just live for the cards that I get from the people I serve and how I help their family, and I help them forget about quitting this industry and realize a new opportunity, and, help people dream again. And so it's really rewarding too, because I get to live out this reality that I tell my kids when I leave and go on a trip. I say, or have to work on a Saturday sometimes. I tell my son and soon my daughter that I'm going to help families. And because that's what I truly do, is the tools and the training and the support that I provide are unlocking the potential for others to, get what they want for their family. And it's really fun, because Max will say, I want to help families too. And that's awesome to live out that, not as some feel good hyperbole that appeases my son, but I actually get to experience it from the families that I do serve, and know that when I do have to go, I tell Max all the time that I help enough families get what they want. We'll get what we deserve, which is a life of abundance. I remember early on when I had big dreams, when I was first inspired by entrepreneurship, people that did not have the vision for themselves, or maybe had it but never attained it, would question. It's like, well, why do you need the big house or travel in the fancy manner? And the simple thing is that I would say to that now is, well, who's it for? And why not me? That's why you help enough families get what you want, you get what you deserve. Well, that's what I deserve. Why not me? And so I'm going to help people until I get it.
You're speaking as you're saying this, you're speaking to the ripple effect that is why I do the work that I do. So, it's been a little while since you and I worked together, but I still get those texts every now and then when I'm lucky enough on a Saturday afternoon of Max, saying those words of I want to help families too. And, whether it's a client that I'm working with now or somebody that I've worked with in the past, those little moments, they just bring me so much fulfillment, because I know this collective work that all of these people are doing to just say, like, how can I be better? How can I impact people? What else can I do? What can I contribute? That brings me life. And I love getting to still see that and hearing about all the wins that your company is having and your family. It's something that's been really special about the Fisher family, is that I've gotten to spend a lot of time with you guys in person, and that isn't always the case in this day and age, in this world. We work with a lot of people that are all over the country and even the worlds, and so that's been really special for me.
I'd love to, maybe flip the script for a moment and ask you, what is it that you feel is the reason why most people don't invest in developing themselves with an asset or a resource like yourself? Why do you think that people, and I would look at it two ways. They never take the leap. And then maybe they do, because I know a lot of times where, a coach like yourself, like you start with just like an initial engagement. Maybe you work together for a few months. What prevents them from a long-term relationship? Because like you said, they worked together for 5 years. So I guess those two levels of the question of why do they never get started and why don't they continue?
It's such a powerful question, and the irony is one of the questions I was gonna ask you, but I'm gonna answer your question first, is why did you decide to invest in yourself? Because it's different. It's not just learning marketing or going to a sales conference. I think the real reason is because we have a tendency to look outside of ourselves for the answer to things. There's still a lot of people that are growing companies that are stuck in spreadsheet mode, that are trying to build these models, and they're just trying to see it in a spreadsheet and say, if I can get X sales and conversion rate is this high, then everything is going to be okay. When you really have to look in the mirror and ask yourself this question of like, how do I see myself? What is the story I tell myself about who I am when I wake up every single day? What is the narrative that I am giving myself now, and maybe that I want to be giving myself to be the person that I want to be? But most of us weren't taught this kind of practice of working on the inside for it to come to fruition on the outside. We're kind of just stuck in a little bit of this like almost scarcity thinking of like, what's the model that I need? What's the playbook? Can someone just give me like the 10-step formula? And I know that this isn't just stuff I see with my clients in my work. I know you see this with people in your industry too. I know you guys have people coming to you that are like, can you tell me exactly how much money you're going to be able to help me make in the next 90 days when I implement X, Y, and Z? And the trust that you build in yourself and your skill set and your ability to just become, I don't even want to call it the best version of you because I think that's ever evolving, but become somebody that you're proud of every day. And become somebody that loves your life and is fulfilled by the work you do and loves putting your feet on the ground every day. That self-reflection work will get you there. It's transformational and there's no denying it.
Yeah. So, and then I guess the resistance that people face in starting or continuing is that they wish it were this like external factor rather than this internal work. Like it's got to be more objective and specific sequence of actions or decisions to get what they want. And the fact that it isn't that linear causes them to avoid or resist. Is that a
I'd
fair
say that
summary?
sums it up. Yeah, I'd say that absolutely sums up. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I wanted to kind of eradicate that from my own business. I didn't want to keep having conversations with people that, were looking for a playbook. And the book is a way that I've been able to kind of remove that from my qualifying process, because I don't really work with anybody at this point that hasn't read the book. And if you read the book, it's pretty clear that we're going to be doing, some inner work. We're going to be doing some deeper conversations, unless there's a bigger answer to this. But I have a handful of projects I'm working on right now that aren't necessarily in that bucket, but in that particular facet of my business and of the work I do. You gotta be able to get real with yourself and be open to having those conversations.
They certainly bear a lot of fruit, but it doesn't go the way you would expect. And I think the reality is be free of expectation. And that was what served me. I remember you said November 2018. I remembered that first call, and I've said this to so many people. And I think the marketplace has evolved, and now the more times I make this statement that you did, I was like, yeah, what are we gonna do together? And you said something to me, and like I said, I've shared it, and now more people, it's like, yeah, I get, yeah, sure. But when I first heard it, and many times I told the story after that, I still was like, what the heck does that mean? And I was like, yeah, what are we gonna do together, Mallory? And you said, well, I'm gonna hold space for you. And he said, well, what does that mean? You, I think, said this earlier in the call, is that, this journey of entrepreneurship, certainly in the beginning, it's lonely. You don't have anybody who gets it. You're willing this future reality into existence. And there's many people that if you try to explain it to, it wouldn't make sense. And if you were able to articulate, they wouldn't believe you and think you were crazy. And so, to have this space, this environment to share what is real for you, but doesn't yet exist in anybody else's reality, to be vulnerable, to process through these things so that it can come into existence is deeply valuable. I mean, the thing that began the journey for me is the thing that remained the most important thing week after week for years, was just that safe space to work through whatever was in my mind, to release it. And that alone, one of the things I've said to people before, it's like, oh, what's that about? It's like, I was like, gosh, she's kind of like my entrepreneurial therapist, you know? And
Careful with that word.
yeah, well, but you know, but you know, for me, and I've had this conversation before with many people. It's like, but the difference is that she's actually a coach, and what does that mean? When I say stuff that requires feedback or would be useful to have reflection on, I actually get it. You know, where in the traditional like therapist, it's like you just talk endlessly and never get any feedback. At least that was my experience in the more traditional space. So I really like coaching because when you have this trust in this relationship, the conversation is not just one sided and you can get good feedback to move through things. So, and I'll always, you know, that space was the biggest thing. And then there were two other things that came from that just like continue to serve me today. And I say to other people, some people don't want to hear is, you know, number one is don't solve problems that don't, or don't try to solve problems or worry about problems that don't exist. You know, fear and doubt grows in the darkness. And so this internal dialogue we have in our mind that we never release into that conversation that is the light, you know, causes it to kind of fester and you know, you make a mountain out of a molehill and so, you know, just having that reflection, you know, I remember you said to me one time, and you probably had to repeat other times, you know, before it really sunk in, but now it's just like this muscle of mine, which is, have you ever arrived to a situation you weren't prepared to conquer, to work through, to move through or grow through? And the simple answer was no. And so why get so worried and worked up about things that you haven't had to face yet? And maybe you never will. And so that was a huge takeaway in our work together. And then the other one was like to use your voice. Well, that's part of that space is like to actually express. Don't just let it sit inside the recesses of your mind, but to actually say it out loud. And so those two things have continued to serve me well, and in being a leader, and then developing others, and hopefully creating that space for others as well.
The last one is so important, and I think it's the one that people kind of overlook sometimes because we think about these things as like soft skills, you know, using your voice. That might sound like woo-woo to someone or like airy-fairy to someone, but how does using your voice show up in business? Okay, well, it shows up in business because you're setting the standard for how you want the company to go. You're setting the standard for how you want your employees to work with your clients. You're firing people when you need to fire them. You're leading yourself and hiring the right people for the right seats that are a good match for your company. You know, the expression piece and using our voice, we make money through conversation. We do. There's a lot of money that's made through communication and conversation. And if you have a bit of an avoidance pattern and you are, you know, leaning back in your chair while your team's trying to stir up the energy and you're not, you know, carrying that power stance and being direct and being clear about, you know, where you're headed and what you need, then they're going to mirror that. And so we think it's this like woo-woo thing again, but this is how you lead. Your voice is representative of how you lead in the decisions you make. And if you're not thinking about this as a skill to be built, because most people, most entrepreneurs, a lot of the people that I work with are 30 to 40 years old. And most of the time, they don't have like 30 years of experience, right? In leading. So this is a skill that's being built over time, and that's perfectly fine. But the mindset to look at it as a skill, as something we're working towards, as a pursuit, as a part of your being and a part of who you are, is really that internal shift. So it's not just this, oh, I need to be expressive. It's really reflecting and looking at how was my voice used in the last 7 days? What areas could I have spoken up more? What areas did I stay quiet on? What areas maybe did I need to pull back a little bit and actually trust my team a little bit more? It plays into everything. And it's a powerful skill that every powerful CEO that I've gotten the pleasure of working with is in pursuit of.
Yeah, and I've realized that there's many people that are afraid of the reaction or response that speaking up will create, and they don't want to do that work, which is like handling what comes next. And what I see people do is they like kind of retreat into this like safe zone of a well-crafted email, and it's just like, man, did you just pick up the phone?
Mm-hmm.
You know, have you said something? Hey, the thing you just said to me, this is the safer space. You know how I'll respond.
Mm-hmm.
But have you said that to him? and man, so many breakthroughs that I've seen happen in our team and people in the company lately. It's just like, hey, I think we just need to talk about it. And people avoid those hard conversations. Like, and I think very smart people, like, they're deeply analytical. I mean, they have this pattern of avoidance of not speaking up, and often they're trying to like craft this perfect situation where they wouldn't have to kind of confront the discomfort. And those are the people that I'm saying. It's like, you're trying to work a problem that doesn't currently exist. Like, maybe if you just said what you're feeling, what you said to me, to them, like, this would all go away, because you realize it's not really an issue. And if only they knew, they could resolve towards the reality that you wish were true. And so that taking responsibility for the power of just speaking, and with great power comes great responsibility. It's like, yeah, there may be a reaction, but then you confront the reality, like, you're not gonna die,
Mhm.
right? You're
Mhm.
not gonna say something, and Almighty God will strike down and end your life. Like, that's just like, has that ever happened? Oh, okay. Right? Have you, is anything terminal? No. Okay. Well, maybe you should try just talking through it.
Mhm.
Talking it out loud. And the thing, when you get others to do it, or you do it in front of others, I think that's been the biggest help, is that then you just have to really anchor and reinforce it for people. It's like, you see how much, what if we had that conversation 6 months ago? What if you spoke up to me and I said back to you, like, meeting today? We had something that we were just handling, and it's just going to be so much more flow. I mean, I want to say, I feel like we've talked about this, right? The big leap, right? We've
Oh, yeah. That was one of the first books I read in
Yeah,
in personal development.
it's such a great book, and it talks about the upper limit problem and zone of genius, right? And the reason I thought about this zone of genius, because I was like, hey, listen, like, you're trying to carry all this weight. What if we just talk it out? I was like, let's go have a meeting with these people next week in person. Like, I feel like if they knew how you felt, they would want to resolve it.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
And I don't think anybody knows. And man, Zoom and this virtual world we live in is great, but let's just go meet in person
Mhm.
and let's just talk it out. And I was like, you just have to be there, and you just convey how you feel. I'll handle the rest. And then whatever feels right, you say. And what you just said to me, you're gonna say that there again. But I'll be there too. And man, you could just make things go away. That doubt, that turmoil you feel, is just because it hasn't been released.
Mhm.
And, yeah, so there's just been so much fruit that has come from just speaking and realizing, like, I think it's Marie Forleo. I've never, like, invested in any of her stuff. I'm sure you've heard of her before, but
Mhm.
she has this, like, great line that I just, like, it goes along with this idea that there isn't any situation that I would encounter that I couldn't, work
Figure out.
through. And
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, you know what I'm gonna say.
Everything is figure outable.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And I just always, like, every time somebody brings it up, it's like, yeah, we can figure it out. Like, that's what we do. It's like, y-
That's what we do, but you just alluded to it. It's that right there. That's why the identity work is so important. That's what we do, because you know yourself as someone who figures it out, who problem solves, who moves through stuff. You're not just looking for the solution. And
yeah.
that's so important.
And that's the difference. Like, the people who, like, bear this weight of, like, these future potential problems that have yet to be encountered and may never be, but you're gonna bear their burden now. That's a choice. But so many people don't realize it's a choice, and they get
Mhm.
frustrated when I say, it's like, yeah, no big deal. We'll figure it out. We'll just, like,
Mhm.
work through it. And I was like, hey, don't solve problems that don't exist. I'm not. I don't, kind of feels like you are. Kind of feels like you are. Like we don't even know if this is an issue yet. Like, let's go talk to the people. If it is, like, yeah, we'll just figure it out. And I realize, just as you reflected now, like, that is an identity piece. And there isn't anything that I hear about that is shared with me that I like get worried about. And I just, like, Tony Robbins, talks about, like, suffering is a choice. And it's like, I don't know why you choose it. Right? You just, like, you wear this burden, so intensely, and I just, like, let go. A mentor of mine, I'm sure you've heard of the book before, it's The Surrender Experiment. Just let go. Don't hold on so
Mhm.
tight. Like, it wears you out. And, just surrender to, really own the idea that life happens for us, not to us. Nothing's happening to me. Like, this is just life. Like, is it supposed to be different? Maybe. Maybe it will be. Right now it is. It's okay. And I mean, that's just a way better way to live, I feel. I found. I know. So,
We don't always realize that we get the opportunity to assign meaning to things. Until that is something that we learn about through ourselves, we often think that everything inherently just has the meaning that it has, right? But these experiences and these situations that we go through an entire filtration process in our mind of how we perceive a situation, and we're constantly assigning meaning to everything that's happening in our life. And until we are aware that that is completely within our control, it is suffering. It is a path of, suffering to the degree that, the emotional suffering of it will just keep you in a constant state of stress.
no way to live.
Not if there's other ways.
Yeah. And, some people, like, their identity is rooted in the suffering, and it's like this home. You see people do this, like, with, a pattern of decision making or suffering or relationships. You talk about, it's like the drama triangle. It's like, I gain significance in my suffering. It's like, I don't know how to I don't know an alternative. And so it's hard to let go of that because you have to find, a new relationship, a new meaning. And so I can appreciate the resistance people feel when they encounter this new frame collides with their reality and say, you could just let go.
Mhm.
You just let up a little bit, see how it feels. So it's but it's certainly a better way to live. And listen, it makes the process. It doesn't mean it isn't hard, but what it does mean is that hard doesn't have to be a bad thing. And challenge doesn't have to be a burden. And so I think that's the difference. Like you said, it's just how you experience the challenge that changes everything. So that's how I choose to live. And you certainly have been a huge support in coming to that way of living and reality. And it compounds in other things because what we do is challenging. You get to a point. I mean, so many people get into, like, the online marketing world, and they're just like, man, it's like 10 grand a month. And he's like, oh, 100 grand a year. And then you realize, man, that doesn't really do much if you have a team and stuff like that. The problems don't go away. We just get better, and they don't get smaller. We get stronger. Is the reality. And it's like, at one point you got started and you wanted to, make six figures in a year. And then, you get so you get good enough that you maybe have the opportunity to, have to weather a six-figure loss in a month and sleep and to not lose a step, and for others to not know that you took it on the chin last month. Then everything's figure outable when you get to that level of ability and capacity to handle the stress, and for everyone to say, man, I wish I had your problems.
I think getting rid of or completely eradicating problems it leads to boredom, and that can lead to a lot of mental health items that I'm not gonna label because I don't have the authority to. But when, you're on this pursuit, and I see this a lot with people who are just looking to achieve financial freedom, and I'm certainly not trying to speak for everybody, but most of the people that, I find myself surrounded by, or that are interested in any of the content that I've put out for the last 8 years, they don't wanna just have no problems. They're not really looking for a life with no problems and no creativity to work on and no projects to explore. I've seen it over and over again that someone's sitting in a founder seat or a CEO seat, they build this team up, and the team is essentially kind of taking the lead, and then they're kind of twiddling their thumbs saying, well, what do I need to do now? And what do I need to work on? And it's like another evolution of growth in that phase where they have to then create a new identity because they have built the team, and now the identity needs to be looked at of, what's next for you? What's going to challenge you? What kind of, For you, it's constantly like, how is my company going to provide more value? What other products can I do? What other verticals of the company can we start, or even different businesses can we start? So the anxiety in our mind, or the story in our mind, the alarm system that goes off when a problem occurs, and it tells us it's bad. It places this judgment on it, and it says, this is a bad thing. We need to remind ourselves that, if we didn't have any problems, we're probably going to be bored out of our minds. People that are listening to these are the people I'm talking to. You're going to be bored. And there's nothing worse than a creative entrepreneurial spirit that's bored out of their minds, for them and their life. They want to work. And it's not that you have to be in this suffering savior mode, but it's okay to be somebody that wants to enjoy the pursuit of creation and collaboration and creativity. That's okay.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I find when I working with someone and they're like pointing out like, or they comment to, on something new or bigger, it's like, is this a distraction? Yeah, this is a valid question, right? Should we be doing this? And I find that I know like I'm on the right path and they're just uncomfortable. When I respond is, what's the alternative? Is it just to stand still? Is it just to accept the status quo? Is it to accept the plateau? And so I know when I'm saying what's the alternative and I get generally silence, I know that it's like, whoa, we're in like this expansion mode and we have to pursue the discomfort, the new, because the alternative is to kind of retreat. It kind of goes in with the mindset of like, if there are no problems to solve, well, I mean, nature doesn't stagnate. You're either growing or dying. So if you're not like growing and facing new challenges, it's atrophy sets in. And so you have to keep pushing the envelope.
That's the only option. That came up for me yesterday, this project that I'm trying to make a decision right now if I want to get involved in. One of the questions was, what are your thoughts on this particular business and the economy? It's like, I pay attention enough and I get it. And this is not about to be a political show. I'm going to start that before, just preface what I'm about to say. I understand the ask, but at the root of it, why are we even talking about this? Because the only other option is to not try and make this company grow. And that's not an option. That's not what we're going to do. We're not just going to come to a standstill. So, that comes up all the time, not even just when you created financial freedom and you are trying to figure out what next to do with your life, but it also comes up when you're paying a whole lot of attention to things that are outside of your control. You can allow yourself to give a lot of meaning to the things outside of your control and let it dictate how you show up. And you always want to be ahead of that. You want to be a couple steps ahead of letting the outside circumstances, have more power and control of you than you've allowed your own mind to have of your behaviors and your habits and how you show up every single day.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to invest in a coach? Why'd you work with me?
There's this simple saying that I believe that anytime you feel stuck applies, and that is the thinking that has gotten you here is not gonna get you there, wherever there is for you. And so I know that I needed a shift in my mindset. And so I needed someone that I could trust to kind of speak truth, because when are a confident leader, and you have some of the fruit to validate that confidence, so it isn't just an ego. You're surrounded by people who just believe in what you are saying, and you don't get a lot of feedback and pushback. Over the years, I've been able to develop to where my leadership team, I have to constantly reinforce, and I have to remind them that I have strong beliefs loosely held in that, listen, man, I'm convicted and persuasive. And so I had my idea for a reason. And if you, provide a rebuttal, I'm going to debate. But, if you debate well and with good reason, then I'll adopt your point of view. Strong beliefs will see help. But if the pattern is that I typically win the debate through certainty or details, that defend my argument from a stronger position, no, that doesn't mean you should not continue to bring up ideas, to push back, to provide feedback. I can just think there's been multiple evolutions of our company and service offerings that have come from somebody, pushing back. We just finished our best quarter ever and, kind of back of our best month ever. And that probably would have been delayed further if someone didn't say, I don't think that's the right idea, as far as like a personnel change and the time that we changed it. And then there was other things like I just resisted adopting a label around, some elements of our services. And then, one of the same person that pushed back in this one story, he's like, well, I was reading the Jeff Bezos annual letter and he said this. And so maybe we should consider not following through on with your resistance to using some of this terminology in our marketing. And so that debate, that reflection in an environment of safety and vulnerability from people you trust is, I think, paramount to growth. And I share all those examples of what I saw in the opportunity of working with you is that I could have somebody who would, for lack of a better phrase, like call me out on my bullshit because I didn't have enough people who could or would. And there's a great, I'm sure you've read some of his books, Patrick Lencioni. I think his probably most popular book is 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. And the biggest dysfunction is the inability to debate. And so and I've had to develop that in our team, the inability to to push back, to argue. And I who had to continue to reinforce as I do with individuals and say, hey, you need to I thank you for pushing back. Thank you for debating me on this. I know that we didn't go with what you brought up, but I need you to know that I value it and I need you to keep doing it. Even if most of the time your idea doesn't come to fruition. It reminds me of, I think it's a core value at Amazon, and I think it's leaders are usually right or always right or something like that. It's disagree and commit goes along with that as another principle or value that they have. The first time you hear that, it's like weird, but it's like, okay, yeah, they have the position because they have the experience and the developed intuition to see things more clearly than maybe a subordinate would. But that doesn't mean you don't have the right to dialogue and debate about it. And so I had that place that I could speak without judgment, but know that if I was speaking in contradiction of what my stated goals or aims were, that I would get that feedback, that corrective feedback that turned into a debate, that
Mhm.
we could talk it out. But to have that place, and now, the thing that I'm grateful for is that I have that on my team, and in that people will push back and debate me. And you start to realize the idea that so many successful and famous entrepreneurs is that the secret is that you got to surround yourself with people smarter than you, people that have ideas different than you, people that could take responsibility for and have greater insights in business functions so that you can work on different opportunities. And so yeah, it's to have that feedback loop to develop my greatest asset, which is my mindset.
You pointed something out in your share, which thank you. It's just such a vulnerable and amazing share that you just gave us. And something that you said, I want to touch on for a second because I know that not everybody listens to this show and all the people that you work with too that might hear this. Not everybody is a business owner. So you just alluded to something that I hear a lot when I'm working with C-suite in the workplace of these complaints of like, my boss doesn't listen to me. Or, when I bring something up to them, it's always a no. And the ability to be objective about what you're debating or how you're debating and bring data and bring very little emotion about the topic that you might be feeling emotional about, when you can kind of work that muscle of emotional intelligence, which often looks like removing the emotion in your communication of how you deliver it, you're going to get a lot farther. So if you feel like you're an employee and you're listening to Jim talking about this and you're like, nah, it's just not worth it. Every time I come to my boss with something, it goes out the window. It's a really good time to reflect at how are you bringing the information? Are you just saying, hey, I think we should do this? And you're not backing it up with reason, and you're not backing it up with data, and you're not spending enough time to collect the information that you're trying to relay? Or, are you really presenting a solution? And same thing you just said, I'm working with a client right now on it. You have to teach your team how to debate with you. You have to tell them, because you guys, here's the reality. You're going to laugh a little bit when I say this, but you guys are hard-headed sometimes. Like you and a lot of the clients that I've worked with, you guys have some of the biggest hearts in the world, but you're hard-headed sometimes. And so you have to go that extra, and you alluded to it. Hey, team, I want you to bring this to me. I want you to debate this with me. You got to keep reminding them over and over again. Even if 95% of the time I don't agree with it because I've already come to terms with it, I want you to keep doing it. It's really important on both sides, both on the CEO or even a team lead side, and anybody that's under the team, as well as when you're bringing feedback to your uppers, looking at and assessing how you're providing that information.
Yeah. It's that process that actually develops the scalability of the organization. And I say that because a mentor of mine said that companies scale at the rate of good decision making. And it's the process of that debate and dialogue around the reasons why you believe your point of view should be adopted by everyone and we should move forward from your perspective. That process of debating and defending your position is demonstration of your reasoning and your decision making. And it's uncomfortable to kind of grow through that and develop that muscle and that discomfort. Eventually you just sometimes you just want to avoid it. And that's why you said the leader has to keep reinforcing and then reward it, and then know that where the judgment is developed and the intuition is developed in certain areas of the operation or business, such that, when people then ask questions, hey, what do you think about this? You can simply just reinforce and say, well, I trust your judgment, whatever you think is best.
Absolutely.
And now that's one area of the business that you don't have to. And now it's like, hey, I went ahead and followed through on that. And then next time that they're just telling you about the decision after the fact, and you can just keep reinforcing or calibrate from there. But if you don't want to become the bottleneck of the business and making all decisions come through you, then you have to process, you have to defend your positions and get people to debate and defend theirs, and to the point of where they gain the strength in their position such that you would adopt theirs. And that's a developmental process that is, it's quicker and sometimes easier if you're like a confident decision maker to not go through that process, but then you'll be the bottleneck. But 100%, one of the things that I had to reinforce, like you just said, that strong beliefs socially held, man, I will talk in definitive and intense language.
That's what builds companies. I mean, it's
That's what's hard. Yeah, exactly. You have to be convicted. That's what you have to go up against, and that can be exhausting. But sometimes it's like, wow, you're intense about that. Why do you think that is? Why so intense? Here's why. Or I didn't feel like you're right. Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm being so intense about it, because it seemed, maybe it's my path to a faster resolution. But building up the strength of those around you is will serve you well in the long term.
say one thing on that. We don't want to turn that part of anybody off, right? Anybody that I'm working with, I can say that about them and it can be factually true. And I also don't want it to go away, because I know that it's part of what's going to help them build a great company. So
Yeah.
it's not about, maybe seeing, maybe some of the more judgmental words will be like stubbornness or hard-headed or whatever. It's not about looking at that and saying, how can I not be that? It's about figuring out how to channel it in the way that's going to make the best decisions for the company. Because if you soften it too much, you lose a little bit of your edge. And honestly, your team needs you to be confident. They need you to be that person that's looking at them when you're having a really hard quarter, and looks at them with all the belief in the world and says, we're going to figure this out. right? So you need a little bit of that almost wild certainty there. I don't even know where it comes from sometimes, but it's a gift. And it's not something we want to turn off.
But know that it can be challenged.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The thing that, no one will ever have to say to me is to remind me that to debate is okay, you know? But I have to remind them because I'm a force to be
You'll go for it.
reckoned with. Yes, exactly. And the other thing that I've reminded, like the people, like you have that that layer, the higher level people that you just need to remind them, like, even though you're not winning most of the time, I need you to keep bringing the debate. And then there's that layer below them. It's like, hey guys, we're not mad at each other. Like, this is important. And that's one of the things I've learned. It's like in the first evolution of growing a team and having that first layer of leadership, like nobody, and all the books that I've read, I've never heard, no one's ever said it's like, hey, listen, in the beginning, you'll assume too much capability of too many people, right? Just because they're on the leadership team, like you assume that they should be, working on strategy and having these debates. And then over time, you realize there's different environments for different levels of conversation. When you get to the right level, like there's that trust that, you can kind of, one of the things I'm realizing, now that we have like these different levels, like we have our management team and then we have our director team. And the biggest difference is the speed at which the dynamic can change. You can go from, pure intensity to, talking shit and bullshit. It's like 0 to 100, like in seconds, and managing that dynamic and realizing, it's like you can say that over here and people laugh, and over here people think that somebody's getting fired. It's like, and it's just learning that dynamic. But yeah, it's been a great journey.
And everything you just said all kind of goes back to this continual thread of this conversation is, conversations bring up emotion, and the more in touch we are with our own emotion, or the more we build a healthy relationship with our emotional resiliency, the easier it is to move through some of these higher level decisions that a company needs to make, potential conversations that could be confronting or stir up some energy. It all goes back to our ability to move through emotion in a very neutral and grounded way.
Yes. And that's one of the great benefits of that I received in working with you.
It was so fun. I loved our time together. It was an absolute just honor to be able to see your company grow as much as it has, and your family.
Yeah.
You had 2 babies in the time that we worked together. Couple different houses that you've
Too many.
moved around in. Likewise, I could see the same for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
But
if anyone's listening to this and they want to know more about, what you do, your company, or even like how to learn more about some of the business skills that you embody and that you've learned throughout the years, or they want to come work with you and for you because they're like listening to you and they're like, he sounds like he could be an amazing boss. How can they find you? What's the best way?
well, it's a lot. I mean, juicebox.com. Our juicebox has no I because domains, I'm even the one without the I, not cheap. But yeah, that's kind of the business home of everything else we do. And then, my YouTube channel, which is just Jim Fisher, is probably the other way to get to know me. And if this winds up on there, I'd flip that question back to you. What about you? I mean, what if they wanted to kind of do their inner work on themselves with you? How would they do that? They got to read your book first.
Yeah, I want them to read my book. That's the first place I want them to start, even if they don't read the whole thing, because I know how it is. I've got books too that I've read half of it and I haven't finished it, or that's sitting on the shelves and I
It's a
haven't
rite of
picked it up yet.
passage.
I just want them to thumb through the book, take a peek at the book before they send an email or before they, have a direct reach out. But that's where I would go. Theabundancedecision.com is the URL for the book, or you can find it on Amazon. The URL will take you to Amazon. So that's the first place.
That's awesome. Well, I think we've hit a lot of
Covered
topics.
it.
This is
Yeah.
so awesome to to reconnect, and I look forward to the next time. Hopefully, it's not too far into the future, and maybe we'll be offline. Well,
Yeah.
we'll leave it there, and until the next time.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.